much for inviting me. I'm here with multiple hats on because I realised I'm the Scottish Council of Deans of Education Languages Group co-chair together with my lovely colleague Fran from Glasgow, my ECML hat, and I'm also obviously a migrant myself, so I have a lot of stakes in this topic. National Framework for Languages. This was my role before I started at Strathclyde, and I'm going to explain a bit about the framework, a bit about the context and how it sits in. But essentially, this SCDE, Scottish Council of Deans of Education Languages Group, which is a mouthful and will take up 10 minutes of my talk to keep referring to that in its full title, decided that we needed to look at languages in its widest form. So we wanted to create a form, something that we could use for students and teachers throughout ITE and eventually also throughout their career-long professional learning, to develop an understanding of the role of languages in and for education. It's all available online. We've had a bit what I call, I think, a soft launch. We've been trialing it out across the ITE institutions, so Aberdeen, Dundee, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Stirling, University of the West of Scotland, especially, and Strathclyde, I better mention that because I'm working for them. And as I said, the idea is we identified some key principles because we realized, some studies done by SAILS, that student teachers don't always feel very confident about language teaching, and ITE institutions don't always spend a lot of time explicitly teaching it. So we wanted to think about the wider picture, because often in our practice in ITE, we speak very much about, teaching foreign languages as part of the 1+2, as the modern languages strand. We also there are concerns about, students or children whose first language is not English, being new to English, and how we support them in their learning. But to maybe focus less on the wider issues around plurilingualism, diversity, policy legislation, and transformative practice, and how these link. So that's what our aim was for the national framework for languages. So what did we want from this? So we want student teachers to explore and understand their own assumptions, because one of the issues we found is we need to start with teachers. They need to know how they perceive languages, how they feel about languages, before we can then work with them in exploring the languages of their classrooms. And also, we want students, teachers to understand the principles of supporting languages and literacies, and actually the importance of supporting mother tongue languages in developing this literacy. So away from the deficit model, this child does not speak English, so can't access the curriculum, but more thinking about how can we help, how can we use the linguistic repertoire of these children to support the English acquisition, but also actually support cultural and social diversity in our classrooms. So it's 3 parts: National Framework for Languages, a resource bank of studies, and also a profile collective questions that we use in ITE to support students thinking around this. And as I said, the focus in ITE has been on languages as part of 1+2. English is an additional language. As student teachers are often unsure how to include diverse range of languages. And we had this from previous speakers, sort of, what do we do with a child that comes in, doesn't speak English, maybe speaks a language we don't speak, and how do we support them in accessing the curriculums? And also, as I think some of the speakers also raised, there's notions about social capital and perceptions of value. So we might say to one child that has Spanish or French, these are seen as having capital, social capital, as important. You speak French, that's great. And then when child comes with Lithuanian or even Dutch or Polish, we go, we don't know how, we don't assign the same value to it, and we do it unconsciously. And it's sort of part of the national framework was about getting teachers to really think about how we respond to children in all possible ways. And actually I came across this quote and I thought it was very topical for this, because obviously it was Mother Tongue Day, the 21st, so last week, and the importance of this, and it's recognized by UNESCO how important mother tongue education and accessing heritage and cultural expressions are. And multilingual education has a role to play. And in Scotland, I think, you know, there's been examples from the Netherlands raised, which I'm always quite interested in, as being Dutch myself. So maybe, and having come here as a migrant, so you kind of feel, you know, the importance. And my son's actually currently, as I'm speaking to you, in a Dutch lesson to help him connect with his mother tongue, which, you know, is, I think, quite a nice coincidence just now. So we wanted teachers to be aware that a language is more than just words, you know, because we very often focus on mechanics. So children, yeah, make sure children access language, but we sometimes tend to forget about texture, the identity, their belonging, their agency. Who are they, and how does it define them as a person? So a migrant child that comes here has multiple cultures, and how do we support this? How do we make sure that they feel a sense of belonging without losing their links to their original culture and language? And also, we want teachers to be aware that language use are positive and negative. And this is especially the case, I think, for those with a migration background. I've got two examples here, one from a textbook and one from a research study I'm involved in. When people feel anxious about their language, and it's how society perceives other languages. So first, whenever I speak Tlingit, I can still taste the soap because people would literally have their mouth washed. Yeah. But another one from about a 7-year-old girl who they said, I speak Arabic, but I'm not allowed to speak Arabic at home. I don't outside. I feel really anxious about it because people tell me to go back to my own country, but I live here. This is where I belong. This is a 7-year-old, and she's already become aware of values assigned to languages and where that sits within her society. So there's also an awareness that language and identity is complex and sensitive, and some people may feel anxious about their mother tongue. So there's a family coming from Ukraine, and they didn't want to speak Ukrainian because they were anxious. You know, they were, they was Russian and Ukrainian had to be hidden, and they felt quite anxious. It's something else we need to recognize in schools, that there may be situations where children maybe do not feel comfortable because there's societal perceptions around language. And I think as teachers, we have an important, part to play in addressing these. So part of our role is to look at, like, language learning is holistic, recognizing the linguistic repertoire. So when children come with other languages, we do not want them to forget that Ukrainian speakers, Arab speakers, we want them to bring that to our classrooms. And we want teachers and children to celebrate this diversity, because it actually helps mutual understanding and support all learners. Because, I live near Inverness, there is not that many, but that multicultural, not maybe as multicultural as other communities, but recognizing, and children are inherently interested in, children are fascinated by other languages. And I work with a Pakistani school, and children, whenever I speak about this, children love it because other cultures, it doesn't faze them. They do not fear other languages. They're fascinated by it, and they share an understanding. So it's getting teachers to, student teachers especially, that's my role, to support this. It's sort of part of the national framework's purpose. It isn't just about how do we teach a modern foreign language, but also what can we do to support all languages in our communities, in our classrooms. And one of the things I can want to emphasize is, like, Margaret Allen and and Khadija Mohammed have contributed to this, and they're really great in explaining this. Khadija from her own personal view, and Margaret also from a perspective. And this is the sort of things that we've shared across ITE institutions to share with all students, so we all get a consistent message which I think is important when we speak about the issues. We've got together all the ITE institutions to have one message around this that is unified, and so it strengthens our position, I think. Okay, so I think lastly, so we want to support children valuing otherness, languages and culture of the children, with the children, encouraging metalingual awareness of children, so not hiding a language, and becoming aware of what it means to speak other languages, even though we as adults might only speak one language. We need to ensure that our teachers, when they go out into schools, they can really support all children, whether there's one language, multiple language, whether it's learning other languages. Okay, that's it. That's the end of my presentation.